Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. On the program this week, we'll be talking to the new African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, about his vision entering the commission and what he hopes to achieve by the time he's done. Almost every region in Africa is either going through political or security crisis. Just last week, the AU held a high-level meeting on securing sustainable peace in Africa, and much of the discussion centered around the impact of climate change and how to mitigate against it. We'll be delving into that in a moment, but first, a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles.
Francis has described the Syrian Civil War as one of the worst humanitarian crises of current times, saying its 10th anniversary should spur all to seek a silver of hope for a devastated nation. In mid-March 2011, peaceful pro-democracy protests developed into a multi-sided conflict that sucked in world powers, killed hundreds of thousands of people, and displaced millions more. Pope Francis says the country has seen every type of violence and enormous suffering by the population, especially the most vulnerable, such as children, women, and the elderly. The Chinese embassy in the UK has condemned joint statements on Hong Kong's electoral system reform by the UK, G7, and high representatives of the EU as sheer slander and outright interference in China's internal affairs. The condemnation came in response to the statement by the UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab on Saturday, claiming that China's decision to impose radical changes to Hong Kong's electoral system is part of a pattern designed to stifle all voices critical of China's policies and constitutes a further clear breach of the legally binding Sino-British Joint Declaration. China says it strongly condemns and opposes Britain and related countries and politicians of some organizations for confusing right and wrong and black and white and outrageously attacking China and rudely interfering in China's internal affairs.
Welcome back. On Tuesday last week, African leaders gathered, albeit virtually, for a high-level meeting of the African Union Peace and Security Council, the AUPSC, on securing sustainable peace in Africa. President Muhammadu Buhari, who was invited to the meeting, was represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyama, who read out the president's statement. President Buhari focused his statement on the impact of climate change, which has had on sustainable peace on the continent, saying that while climate change is not often considered the primary cause of conflict, its complexities have demonstrated that it could easily act as a risk multiplier, exacerbating underlying vulnerabilities and compounding existing grievances. He asked leaders to recall the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, saying at the UN Security Council that where climate change dries up rivers, reduces harvests, destroys critical infrastructure, and displaces communities, it exacerbates the risk of instability and conflict. President Buhari noted that climate change has contributed to rising insurgency and armed conflict, partly in response to emerging challenges with resultant displacements of persons and livelihoods. He called on leaders to renew calls for concerted action towards addressing causes and effects of climate change, calling attention to Lake Chad, which he said would contribute to addressing the root causes of conflict and insecurity in the region. He suggests that one way of achieving this is by channeling the waters from the Congo Basin, in addition to other notable initiatives in this regard. President Buhari's message was echoed by the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, who also called on African leaders to unite and develop a common position to fight climate change ahead of this year's UN Climate Change Conference, saying leaders can no longer ignore the serious security challenges associated with climate change. He also announced that Kenya will implement a 10-year action plan that will see it raise its tree cover to 10% by 2030. Kenya, he says, will also prioritize renewable energy sources such as solar and wind and introduce climate-smart interventions in the transport sector, such as the bus rapid transit system, integrated with non-motorized transport for the city of Nairobi. Researchers Dr. Cedric Dekonin with the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs, who's also senior advisor for the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, and Dr. Florian Kramp, a senior researcher and director of the Climate Change and Risk Program at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, both believe that the gradual increase in global temperatures, as well as the increase in erratic rainfall and flooding, have direct, complex, and interlinked implications for peace and security, because they significantly disrupt livelihoods and food security and may result in forced displacement and migration. Climate change, they say, exacerbates vulnerabilities and weakens the resilience and adaptive capacity of agriculture-dependent communities. They also say across the Sahel, South Sudan, and Somalia, climate change and existing conflicts also affect the risk of clashes between herding and farming communities over access to land, water, and pastures. The reason being that climate change affects pastoralist travel routes, bringing them in closer proximity to farming communities, causing tensions over land, grazing, and communal conflicts. In other cases, displacement can make youth more vulnerable to recruitment by local militia or armed groups. They're advising African institutions to improve their preparedness by investing in analysis and early warning capacities to take early action to preempt, prevent, and respond to emerging climate-related insecurity, among other strategies. Let's talk now to the man who will be heading the AU's Political Affairs, Peace and Security Council over the next few years, Ambassador Bankole Adeoye. Ambassador Bankole Adeoye is a career diplomat with more than 35 years of experience as a Pan-African diplomat, a peace and sustainable development practitioner, an advocate for Africa's regional integration and partnership. Interestingly, he has served 3 times as chairperson of the African Union Peace and Security Council in 2017, in 2018, and in 2019. He served as minister counselor in the Nigerian embassy in Brasilia, Brazil, and was once Nigeria's ambassador to Ethiopia. Now he's the first African Union Commissioner for the newly created Commission for Political Affairs, Peace and Security from 2021 up until 2025. He joins me now from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Ambassador, thank you for joining me on the program today.
Thank you so much.
And congratulations. Oh, great to have you. Congratulations on your historic election and subsequent appointment as AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. What's the significance of this position for Africa and for Nigeria?
No, thank you very much, Amarachi. Let me first of all take this opportunity to express profound appreciation to His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari for nominating me, for supporting my candidacy, and for the success we achieved, overwhelming success. Also to the Chief of Staff, to the President, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs leadership, particularly the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, the Permanent Secretary, and indeed the special envoys of the President and the entire diplomatic community. Indeed, it is important for us to see that the success we achieved was due to the support we received at the highest level. To your question, the significance is very, very clear. As you stated, I'll be the first ever African to lead the newly created combined portfolio of political affairs, peace and security. And that means promoting good governance and peace and security in our continent. It is essential that we see the success as a support for Nigeria, for its foreign policy objectives, where we are coming from, the frontline role we have always played on the continent, and the future of this important union. Because the African Union is aspiring. It is demanding a lot from its member states, from the stakeholders, to ensure that we build the Africa we want, as stated in our flagship document, which is the African Union Agenda 2063. So it is important for us to see that in the first ever electronic elections, Nigeria came tops with 100% support, overwhelmingly, and this is a significant symbol for the recognition of the leadership role Nigeria continues to play on the African continent.
And you're taking over at a time when a lot is happening on the continent as we speak. In the last 2 years, particularly related to insecurity, political conflict, and of course the coronavirus pandemic. What is your vision, Commissioner, in addressing these challenges as AU Commissioner?
Thank you very much. We must see Africa as a transforming continent. I'm a reform-minded Pan-Africanist with over 35 years experience in the diplomatic field, a strong believer in Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance, and in moving forward, believe that collective security and collective defense is the best way to address the challenges that we have. We must take good governance as the centerpiece of our actions. And in doing so, I have tried to build my vision on 5 strong pillars. The overall vision is to build synergy for a peaceful, secure, and a more democratic Africa. But in doing so, from tomorrow, I will be taking forward the 5 strategic pillars. Number 1 priority for me is to re-energize the continental early warning system and ensure that the Africa we want is built around conflict prevention and mediation. We must invest more in shuttle diplomacy. We must invest more in inclusive engagements when it comes to conflict prevention. We must put all our resources at the leadership level, at the technical level in the Commission to ensure that we really invest all our energy and time in making sure that early warning is also early action and early response. That is the first pillar. The second pillar of my vision is what I call the integrated capacity for conflict management, particularly in combating terrorism and violent extremism. From the Sahel to the Horn of Africa to the Lake Chad Basin to Mozambique, we have huge challenges and we need to build the capacity for better peace building, peacekeeping, and peace enforcement. That will change the political and security landscape of our continent. And I think we must reinvest time in ensuring that we build this capacity that is integrated, that is responsive, and that makes a difference. The third pillar is about the strengthening of democracy and good governance. These strategic pillars are not in any way exclusive. They are all interwoven, and they all speak to the major issues that we have on our continent. So this is very, very critical because we need to consolidate democracy. Yes, as you stated, Africa has a lot of challenges politically. We are having election dispute, election violence, the low number of women that participate in politics, but we must continue on the trajectory, starting from the 1990s when we said goodbye to military dictatorships and autocracy on our continent. Therefore, I believe strongly that if we invest more time, more energy in promoting democracy, consolidating democracy, human rights, the rule of law, constitutionalism, we will make history and have a continent that will reposition for the best. The fourth pillar is very, very critical, which is to build inclusive partnerships and smart partnerships with all stakeholders, development partners, women, youth, the academia, the professional groups, civil society, in addressing all this. This includes the United Nations Security Council. It includes the EU. It includes the different bilateral development agencies. We must be able to build a peaceful environment for development to thrive so that sustainable development will be the arrowhead of what we are doing. So that partnership is very critical. The last strategic pillar has to do with what I call the implementation of the new merger between political affairs in the AU and peace and security. This means we have to promote the nexus between the African peace and security architecture and the African governance architecture. In this regard, we must work with the APRM, the African Peer Review Mechanism. We must work with AUD and NEPAD, the African Union Development Agency, and all stakeholders to ensure that we implement the new structure, the reform that is championed, the institutional reform of the African Union, that is championed by President Paul Kagame of the Republic of Rwanda. These are my strategic pillars, and I believe with the support of member states and stakeholders on the continent, and in particular the federal government of Nigeria and ECOWAS, as well as the entire membership of the African Union, we can succeed in changing the face of the landscape for peace and security on our continent.
Our conversation with Ambassador Adeoye continues in a moment. Just last week, the Peace and Security Council held a summit-level session chaired by the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. President Muhammadu Buhari was represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyama. The focus was, of course, on how climate change has been affecting peace and security. And I do remember that President Buhari also raised the same issue at the UN General Assembly 2 years ago and even last year when he pointed out the drying Lake Chad basin, which has led to security challenges in West Africa. Now, apart from identifying the problem and preparing against more impact, what else can the AU do to mitigate the impact of climate change and the threat it poses to security in the continent?
We are taking action, and that is why our leaders in the Peace and Security Council, of which Nigeria has consistently been a continuous member for the past 15 years, it is important for us to reinforce and re-energize the processes for ensuring that we adapt and we mitigate against the impact of climate change. It is very, very important to see that this dual approach, mitigation and adaptation by the African Union, will be the best way to go. And that is why our leaders, as you rightly noted, that they have continued to discuss this and engage on this. The AU has what is called CAOS, the Committee of African Heads of State and Government, specifically dealing with climate change. And Nigeria is also a member of that committee. And that committee is presently chaired by the president of Gabon. And in doing so, we have consistently moved towards specific policy initiatives that are also related to peace and security. We need to see, for example, the regional stabilization strategy for the recovery of the Lake Chad Basin, which the African Union adopted recently. Now is the time for implementation. Accelerated implementation that will make a change happen. We also continue to see the technical support of the African Union Commission for the nationally determined contributions as arising from the Paris Agreement of 2015 by the Union in pushing for this. It is also important to know that African Union has also embraced the African Renewable Energy Initiative, which all these initiatives, the African Adaptation Initiative, is also endorsed and promoted by the African Development Bank. We must realize what the UN calls fringe pastoralism, where climate-induced conflict is arising out of challenges relating to floods and drying of Lake Chad. And as you said, we know that Boko Haram and other terrorist groups are operating from the axis of the Lake Chad, which is drying up. Over 30 million lives are at stake because of the drying up of the lake. And as you said, President Buhari, since 2015, has been championing the recharging of this Lake Chad. And through that, the African Union has endorsed what is called the Interbasin Water Initiative, which we believe with the required financial knowledge and human resources, we can make things happen.
As AU Commissioner with the mandate to promote political and democratic governance in Africa, what other specific actions will you institute in ensuring credible elections and protecting human rights in Africa?
It is critical that we understand the history of the continent when it comes to democracy, elections, and good governance. We have come a long way. And in doing so, I must emphasize that first and foremost, personally, I'm a rights-based approach advocate. And that means that the whole gamut of peace, security, and development must be seen from the rights of our people, of all Africans. And that is why the top priorities that I have in this field to ensure credible, free, and fair elections will be towards the faithful, fervent implementation of two critical policy normative instruments of the African Union. The first is the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. The second is the African Charter on human and people's rights. These charters, these conventions require, yes, universal acceptance on the continent-wide 100% support. We do not have that, but we already have these charters in force. And being in force, it is important that we see that we promote a robust election observation and monitoring system. This is already ongoing. Over 19, almost 20 elections are slated for 2021 on the African continent. And you cannot believe it. We have countries in post-conflict. We have countries that have been stable. Chad, Niger Niger has already had its election. Chad is about going to have Benin Republic, Republic of Congo, the Republic of Djibouti. Some of these countries have been stable in terms of democratic experience, and others are going through the consolidation phase. But we must realize that the commitment of our leaders in the Union, the commitment of individual member states, the commitment of the regional economic bodies, RECs like ECOWAS, to democracy is being very solid. And that is where we need to take it forward and ensure that we have the real emphasis on promoting democracy and strengthening democracy for the benefit of our people. I must not forget that the AU, under my commissionership, will continue to have zero tolerance, I repeat, zero tolerance for unconstitutional change of government, based on the Lome Declaration, based on the Constitutional Act of the African Union, based on the many, many pronouncements and conclusions of the Peace and Security Council. We must see that we do not go back to the years and the decades of dictatorship on our continent.
Bankole Adeoye will be watching from here and will be with you every step of the way as you make those changes in the African Union to change our continent. Thank you again, Commissioner, for joining us on Diplomatic Channel, and I wish you a fruitful tenure at the African Union.
Thank you so much.
Finally on the program, a UN human rights investigator says world powers bear responsibility for ignoring crimes against humanity that may still be perpetrated by North Korean authorities amid a focus on its nuclear program. Thomas Ohia Quintina is the UN investigator on the situation of human rights in the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. And he's urging the UN Security Council to refer grave violations in the country to the International Criminal Court for prosecution.
Urgency to stop violations of such a scale.
Mr. Thomas Ohia Quintana has voiced his concerns at reports of severe punishments imposed for breaking COVID-19 lockdown measures in North Korea. He presented his latest report issued last week, which said that drastic measures taken by North Korea to contain the coronavirus have worsened abuses and economic hardship for its citizens.
Unconfirmed reports indicated that officials have authorized law enforcement agencies to shoot on sight anyone attempting to cross the country borders. Several cases of severe punishment against those breaking anti-epidemic prevention measures have been reported by media. A new detention facility for those violating COVID-19 quarantine measures was reportedly built in Nonghwangwe province. The situation of prisons in the DPR Korea, including political prisons, camps, remains of the utmost concern as reflected in the latest OHCHR report.
He says he has received information confirming the findings of a landmark 2014 UN Commission of Inquiry on some of North Korea's crimes.
Throughout the 5 years of my mandate, I have been receiving information that confirms the findings of the Commission of Inquiry, in particular that crimes against humanity may be ongoing. The crimes listed by the Commission included extermination, murder, enslavement, torture, imprisonment, rape, forced abortions, and other forms of sexual violence.
He called on the UN Security Council to decide on the referral of the situation in the DPRK to the International Criminal Court, as has been repeatedly encouraged by the UN Human Rights Council and the General Assembly.
This is it on Diplomatic Channel. Again, I want to thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.